Welcome back to the Sunday Footy Show. It is now time for Inside the 10. Welcome Michael Shamus, Brent Reid and Andrew Webster. Good to have you all on. Now, plenty to discuss this morning. Let's start off with Manly. Des Hasler's future at Manly. What's the situation with this at the moment?
Well, he's got 1 year left on his deal at Manly. Him and his camp have been pushing for an extension to rework the contract. That's not going to happen. There's no interest at that club right now in extending Des. It'll depend on how Des starts next year. If he starts next year well, he'll get a contract extension. If he doesn't start next year well, then all bets are off. And it's going to largely hinge on what Des decides in meetings this week, because there's going to be change around him. The club wants to make change around Des. If Des is resistant to that, then he's got a decision to make as to whether he stays or whether he walks away. But that's just part of a myriad of issues at the club at the moment. There's some fractures there in terms of the strategic direction of the club. There's all sorts of issues in the playing group. There's a push in some quarters to change the captain and make Jake Trbojevic the captain over Daly Cherry-Evans. There's a lot going on there, and it's a huge off-season for that club. It's a huge fortnight for that club.
When you say change the team around Des, what do you mean by that? Is other
just the football
coaching staff?
The football department staff, the conditioning staff. I think there'll be some questions raised over that, because there were some concerns over guys like Josh Schuster and his fitness this year. Des is going to be asked to accept those changes. If Des doesn't accept them, as I said, he will have a decision to make as to whether he goes through next year and starts next year, or maybe Des walks away, because there is some talk.
Well, you know what he should do? Des should go in there and say, listen, I've been doing this job for a fair while. I've won premierships. I've got us to grand finals at other clubs. I've been around longer than anybody. Name your number and I'll go, because that's untenable. There's no way that he can work under those conditions. And a coach of that stature, there's people who have coached longer than Des that would dream of having a record like that, man. They've had one bad year. One bad year, they've had drama with Tom Trbojevic being injured, and they've had the pride jumper gibber. Look, I don't know how that is enough for him to be under all this pressure from other factions in the club. I think it's unfair.
Manly aren't happy with him, right? And Des is not going to walk away. Why would you walk away when you're going to get $1 million to sit around next year and get paid out? Like, Des is not going to walk away. Manly have played a game of chicken, hoping Des, if they make enough changes and upset Des enough, that he walks away. And it happened at Canterbury. They took people away from Des Hasler. They took all his right-hand men away from him at the time, Noel Cleal, some assistant coaches, and Des kept coaching. And Des, he fell away as a coach. He became paranoid, and we all know how it ended up at Canterbury. I think Manly are doing the same thing, and they're hoping that Des walks, but he hasn't walked before. And their performances, I know you said they've had one bad year, but I think they made the finals last year. Before that, they struggled. They missed the 8. So he's lost 7 in a row now for the first time in his career. Des has got the runs on the board, but it's the other stuff that's happening behind the scenes that really touch on.
But when is it on the players? Honestly, so it's happened since the jumper round, right? So if those 7 players got their nose out of joint about the jumper, fair enough. If they think it was handled shabbily by the club, which it was, fair enough. But that doesn't stop you from having a crack for the rest of the year. Like, that's a cop-out to say that's the reason they've lost the last 7, as people are.
There were cracks in that club.
And now they're trying to put it, now they're trying to put it on the coach. I think that's wrong.
But is it causing more drama by doing this?
No, I think all the things that Reid touched on, they were happening in the background before this Jersey fiasco happened. And what it's done is exacerbate the problems. And it's all come to a head. And all the issues that were surfacing in the background are upsetting everyone now. And Reid, you've written a story today in the Telegraph about it. I don't know if there's the power play between Scott Fulton and the Fultons and Des Hasler. Who wins that? You're very close to people at Manly. Who's got the most power at the club?
Well, I don't know. I would have said Des a week ago, but I don't know at the moment. I mean, losing 7 games in a row hurts Des. There's no doubt about that. It hurts him badly in terms of the football club, because they think they should have done better this year. In Des's defence, they've had Tommy and Jake both missing the past. Well, Tommy's missed most of the year. Jake has missed a lot of the last part of the year as well. That's $2 million a year salary cap on the sidelines. And those 2 guys love Des. And that's a big issue for the club, because those 2 guys are really frustrated with what's going on at that footy club at the moment. Frustrated to the point where I would say if things don't change, they would consider their futures at Manly. And we all know how much they love Manly. They are Manly. But it's killing them at the moment, those 2 guys. And they love Des. Those blokes want Des to stay. So that's going to play a role in this as well.
We always talk about with coach's future, but then who is going to be the person that comes in and replaces Des if he does go?
Look, I wouldn't go so far as to say they've put together a short list, but there are some coaches on their radar. Freddie's one of them, actually. Lives on the northern beaches. I know his name's been bandied around Manly. Billy's been mentioned as well. Dean Young, Jason
Billy Slater
Ross.
is on the short list.
Well, no, I'm not saying they've got a list at the
He's
moment.
on a list.
I'm saying,
He's on an imaginary
I'm
list.
saying-
Billy
drawn up.
Slater coaches Manly. I'll give it away.
I'm saying there's some names that have been mentioned around the club, and they're the names that are being mentioned.
It's a wish list.
It's a
but then you know what they
potential
are,
wish
though?
list if
They're
things
not
change.
Manly people, though.
But if they're doing
and the
that
only
already-
people that ever has success there are Manly people. Unfortunately, they also don't mind spearing Manly people either. They've done it to Des before.
But that's the thing. If they've already sort of made up a wish list of who they would be, is that not
I
quite
don't know if it's a
disrespectful?
wish list. I'm just saying they're the names that have been
There's a
mentioned.
list
been
and
down
there's
this path
names on it.
before.
That's enough.
It's the end. If the end is near, if you start thinking about other candidates, which we've seen in the past, we saw with the West Tigers, they went stuck with Madge for another year and it ended the way we all thought it was going to end.
So
it's
back,
going to end.
so back him or sack him. That's what they should do.
But then pay him out. The same.
Well, that's what I mean.
With
But
Trent
that's what I
Barrett.
mean. Whether
the
they
same
pay-
thing happened with
That's
Trent
what I
Barrett.
mean. Come out with a number. Give him a number so they can move him on. Because we're just, if you're a Manly fan, get ready for another 12 months
Because-
of jibber jabber and special investigations in the Telegraph and bombshell revelations from Chavis.
Rocking foundations.
Enough.
All right, enough. All right, well, let's move on. Has the NRL got it right with its finals stadium policy? Because there's a lot of discussion about whether games should be played at, for example, the Penrith Eels game, whether it should be played at Bluebet Stadium or whether it should be played at a core stadium to fit in a lot more fans.
I think this will change next year. I think they'll change the policy because I think it's wrong. There's no way you should have a finals game at a stadium that holds 11,500 people and is a construction site. You shouldn't lock out 20,000 fans. We're locking out 20 or 30,000 fans on Friday night. It's ridiculous. And all that money would flow back to the clubs and back to the players. And I understand they can't change it now, but I think they'll look at it in the off-season.
I'm torn on this one. I get the point, but the Cowboys, the Sharks are playing the Cowboys. How many would they get at the SFS if they moved to 20,000? Would they get much more than that? I understand Friday night, Penrith versus Parramatta. You play it at a core stadium, you get 50, 60,000. It'll be unbelievable. But Penrith have played hard all year to get to this point, to get the advantage. And I don't think they get an advantage at a core stadium. They get that advantage at Penrith.
But it's not a disadvantage.
It's not a disadvantage, but they are far and away the best team in the competition, have earned the right to play a home final in front of their fans, to make it a fortress where Parramatta feel uncomfortable, although they did win there this year.
But they also get the
But-
minor premiership and they also get
double chance.
money
The
as
clubs
well.
get
a
nothing.
double chance.
But
The
is it-
clubs get nothing at the moment. If they move that game to a core stadium, Penrith don't benefit whatsoever. They don't benefit right now. The only advantage Penrith get right now is the fact they get a home ground advantage. The NRL make the money from the finals. If they want to turn it around and start giving clubs money for home finals,
But
then
they
the clubs
win
will move
money
it.
for the minor premiership, don't
They
they?
can win $100,000.
But what about
Not even, it's
what
50
about
this
the
year.
punters? What about the fans? Rugby league.
Think of the children.
Think of the people. But honestly, fair income. Like the game struggles for crowds all year. We get to the first week of the finals, we're going to lock out tens of thousands of fans to two of the biggest games of the year. We get these beautiful big stadiums in Sydney, mostly for the benefit of rugby league. And are they going to use them for the big games of the year? Of course not.
Yeah.
So I think that policy should
So,
change.
okay, on that theory, Souths versus Roosters, how many would you get to a semi-final? If you were uncapped, you'd get 60, 70,000? So what, they should move it to a core stadium
Probably.
as well?
Would you get 60, 70,000, you think? Maybe not.
But this is the thing. There's a very big difference between Allianz Stadium and Bluebet Stadium. So you played at Allianz Stadium for that game. The suburban grounds, Penrith, it is a small stadium.
Well, you know what I find amazing, right? Peter V'landys is at war with the government at the moment because suburban stadiums aren't good enough. We're actually ripping down Penrith Stadium, building a new one. Yet we say, oh, they're good enough to play finals at. Isn't that a contradiction? We're saying they're not good enough. We need $250 million to spend on these stadiums, but then we turn around and play our biggest games.
I don't think anyone's saying Penrith's not good enough, even though they're getting
They're
a new
ripping it
stadium.
down.
Oh, I know, but there's nothing wrong with that stadium.
All right, quickly before we run out of time, has Brisbane's season been a success or a failure?
Failure.
Failure.
Pass mark.
It's a failure based on that club.
They haven't made the final.
Because that expectation
Did you expect them to
that
make the
club is
final?
always
Yes.
to play finals.
They should have been there. I bet you they were looking like a top 4 team.
They were looking at the
They
start of
were.
the year. If you
They
said
didn't
they finished
handle
ninth,
Origin well, but
you'd handle
I think
and
it's
take
been
that.
the way things were going. It's turned into a disappointment.
All right, well, Kevin Walters, he labelled it an improvement, so we'll have to see what they have in store for us next year.
Low bar.
Well, it couldn't get worse, could they?
Hey,
Oh,
it always
meow.
can. It can always get worse.